The Resilient Star. A lesson in fairness. Ladies and gentlemen, tune in. Today we invite you to discover The Resilient Star, a compelling tale about Michael, a bright young African-American boy navigating a new school. Unbeknownst to his prejudiced classmates and an indifferent teacher, Michael is the mayor's son. But this isn't a story about privilege. Instead, it's about his extraordinary journey to prove his worth through sheer talent and unwavering resilience. Witness how Michael confronts injustice, rises above adversity, and ultimately delivers a powerful lesson in fairness and integrity to an entire community. Prepare to be inspired. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The scent of stale disinfectant and nervous energy hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the sun-drenched, oak-lined streets Michael had left behind. He stood rigidly by the classroom door, his new backpack, an unyielding blue fortress, slung tight against his thin frame. 11 years old, but today Michael felt the weight of a century on his shoulders. He was new to Northwood Elementary, new to this side of town, and already an unsettling silence seemed to precede him, like a ripple in a perfectly still pond. The classroom, a kaleidoscope of bright posters and the hushed whispers of children, seemed to pause as Ms. Jenkins, a woman whose smile seemed perpetually etched on her face but whose eyes held a distant, almost dismissive glint, gestured him in. "Class, this is Michael," she announced, her voice a shade too bright, too rehearsed. "He's new to our school." A few polite, almost hesitant nods. Then a boy in the front row, whose perfectly gelled hair seemed to defy gravity, nudged his neighbor. A whisper, quickly suppressed, but Michael caught fragments. "Looks different. Where'd he come from?" The words, though soft, landed like tiny, sharp pebbles on his skin. Michael, with his deep, chocolate-brown skin that seemed to absorb the light and his intelligent, watchful eyes, felt the collective gaze, a curious, almost critical weight. He wasn't naive. He'd seen this before. A quick flicker in the eyes of adults, a subtle shift in the playground dynamics. But here, now, it felt more pronounced, a thick, invisible barrier. He slipped into the empty desk at the back, next to a window that framed a vibrant oak tree. Its leaves, a riot of emerald green, seemed to mock the muted atmosphere inside. Michael traced the worn grooves on the wooden desk, a small scar of a journey not yet defined. He wasn't just new, he was an anomaly. His previous school, a small, diverse charter, had celebrated differences. Here at Northwood, in this affluent, predominantly white suburb, his presence felt like a misplaced puzzle piece, yet a quiet fire flickered within him, a resilience forged in countless hours spent buried in books, deciphering complex equations and losing himself in the intricate world of logic. His parents, particularly his father, had always instilled in him a profound sense of self-reliance. Michael, his father, Mayor David Thompson, would often say, his voice a warm rumble, "Your character and your capabilities are your true currency. Never let anyone devalue either, and never rely on what I've built. Build your own." Those words, a bedrock of his upbringing, resonated now more than ever. As the day progressed, the subtle slights accumulated like dust motes in a sunbeam. During group activities, he was often the last chosen, or worse, politely ignored. When he raised his hand to answer a particularly challenging math problem, Ms. Jenkins' gaze would drift past him, landing on a different student, usually Kevin, the gel-haired boy, who exuded an air of effortless superiority. Michael noticed the faint sigh Ms. Jenkins let out when he answered correctly, as if his competence was an unexpected inconvenience. It wasn't overt hostility, not yet. It was a quieter, more insidious form of exclusion, the kind that gnaws at a child's confidence, making them question their own worth. During lunch, the cafeteria, a cacophony of clattering trays and boisterous chatter, felt like a vast, empty expanse. Michael sat alone at a table, meticulously unwrapping his sandwich, a small island in a sea of laughter. He overheard whispers, sharp and dismissive, from a nearby table. "Look, he's by himself again. Probably doesn't even know anyone." A pang, sharp and unwelcome, twisted in his gut. He knew better than to react, better than to let their words pierce his carefully constructed shield. But the loneliness was a tangible thing, a heavy cloak draped over his shoulders. He longed for the familiar comfort of his old friends, the easy camaraderie, the sense of belonging. Here, he was an outsider, a silent observer in a world that hadn't quite decided where to place him. Later that afternoon during recess, the situation escalated. A game of pickup basketball erupted on the asphalt court. Michael, a surprisingly agile player despite his lean build, watched from the sidelines. He loved basketball, the rhythmic bounce of the ball, the strategic maneuvers. He longed to join. When the teams were uneven, he tentatively approached. "Can I play?" he asked, his voice a little softer than he intended. Kevin, dribbling the ball with practiced ease, paused. His eyes, cool and calculating, swept over Michael. "Nah, we're good," he said, a dismissive flick of his wrist. "You probably don't know how to play anyway." Another boy snickered. The words stung, a hot wave of indignation rising within Michael. He saw the subtle exchange of glances, the unspoken agreement. It wasn't about his skill, it was about something else entirely. The sun, once a comforting warmth, now felt like a spotlight, highlighting his isolation. As the final bell mercifully rang, Michael gathered his things, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He walked out of the school, the vibrant oak tree now casting long, melancholic shadows. A sleek black car, his father's official vehicle, was already waiting at the curb. He saw his father, a tall, imposing figure even from a distance, standing by the car, a warm smile gracing his lips. A fleeting thought crossed Michael's mind. He could tell his father, just a whisper, a hint of the day's unfairness, but the thought vanished as quickly as it came. No. This wasn't something to be solved by his father's title. This was his battle. He would face it. He would prove them wrong, not with his father's influence, but with something far more powerful, his own mind, his own spirit. He climbed into the car, the silence inside a stark contrast to the unspoken turmoil within him. As the car pulled away, Michael glanced back at Northwood Elementary, a challenging glint in his eyes. He was a new star, yes, but this star would forge its own path, illuminating the darkness with its own brilliance. The journey had just begun, and the first chapter, fraught with quiet prejudice, had set the stage for a fight not of fists, but of intellect and unwavering resolve. The bruise of the previous day still throbbed, a phantom ache beneath Michael's skin. Yet, as the morning sun streamed through his bedroom window, painting the familiar carpet in stripes of gold, a different kind of light flickered within him. It wasn't the kind of light that sought validation, but rather one born of pure, unadulterated passion. His gaze fell upon the worn cover of his advanced calculus textbook, its pages dog-eared from countless evenings spent in its labyrinthine depths. Numbers, to Michael, weren't just symbols. They were living entities, dancing and interacting in a symphony of logic. Problems weren't obstacles. They were intricate puzzles waiting to be solved, each solution a small victory. This was his sanctuary, a world where skin color and social standing held no sway, where only the elegant truth of mathematics reigned supreme. He walked into Northwood Elementary with a quiet resolve, the whispers and averted gazes of yesterday still clinging to the periphery of his awareness. But today they felt less like tiny pebbles and more like distant echoes. His focus had shifted. Ms. Jenkins, perched at her desk like a falcon surveying its domain, cleared her throat. "Class, as you know," she began, her voice a practiced melody, "the annual school-wide math and science competition is approaching." A ripple of excitement, or perhaps anxiety, stirred amongst the students. "This year," she continued, a glint of genuine enthusiasm in her eyes, "we're aiming for a new record. We want Northwood to shine." She spoke of prestige, of scholarships, of the shimmering trophy that would adorn the school's display case. When she opened the floor for registrations, Michael's hand shot up, a solitary, confident spear piercing the hesitant air. A few snickers erupted from the back, quickly stifled by Ms. Jenkins's sharp glance. Kevin, lounging in his chair with an air of calculated boredom, snorted. "Seriously?" he muttered, loud enough for those around him to hear. "Michael doesn't even know what a quadratic equation is." A wave of low laughter followed. Ms. Jenkins, her smile tightening, simply nodded at Michael. "Very well, Michael. Good luck." Her tone, though outwardly polite, carried a subtle undertone of skepticism, a silent question mark hanging in the air. It was a familiar tune, one Michael had heard countless times in unspoken glances and dismissive gestures. It fueled him not with anger, but with a quiet, burning determination. He would not just participate, he would excel. His evenings transformed into a relentless pursuit of knowledge. While other kids were absorbed in video games or neighborhood escapades, Michael was a silent sentinel in the public library, a vast, echoing chamber filled with the hushed rustle of turning pages and the faint scent of aged paper. The librarian, a stoic woman with spectacles perched on her nose like a wise owl, often found him nestled amongst the advanced textbooks, his brow furrowed in concentration. She had seen countless students come and go, but there was an intensity about Michael, a quiet hunger for understanding that set him apart. He delved into calculus, physics, and advanced chemistry, devouring theories and solving complex problems with a voracious appetite. The world outside the library walls, with its petty prejudices and unspoken judgments, faded into insignificance. Here, on the battlefield of equations and scientific principles, he was truly free. One afternoon, a particularly vexing problem from a past competition stumped him. It involved complex probabilities and fluid dynamics, a thorny thicket of variables. He worked on it for hours, his pencil a blur against the paper, filling page after page with intricate calculations. A shadow fell over his desk. It was Ms. Jenkins, making her rounds during the optional after-school study session. Her gaze, initially dismissive, lingered on his work. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she deciphered the complex equations Michael had meticulously laid out. He had bypassed several steps, using a more elegant, advanced method she hadn't taught the class. A flicker of something akin to surprise, perhaps even grudging respect, crossed her features. "What are you working on, Michael?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. "Just practicing some older problems," he replied, not looking up. She leaned closer, her expression shifting from curiosity to bewilderment. This is well beyond what we cover in class. Where did you learn these methods?" "Online, mostly," Michael said, shrugging slightly. "And from some books here at the library." He gestured vaguely at the towering shelves. A subtle shift in her posture, a flicker of something she quickly masked. "Impressive," she murmured, the word tasting slightly foreign on her tongue. "Just make sure you don't get ahead of yourself. The competition is designed for our curriculum." Her words, though seemingly encouraging, held a subtle undercurrent of warning, as if his brilliance was a disruptive force she needed to control. The moment passed, but the seed of doubt, now tinged with a reluctant recognition, had been planted in Ms. Jenkins's mind. The preliminary rounds of the competition arrived like a series of small, intense skirmishes. Each student was given a series of increasingly difficult problems to solve under timed conditions. Michael approached each paper with the calm precision of a surgeon. While others chewed on their pencils, their brows furrowed in frustration, Michael's hand moved steadily, his mind a quiet whirlwind of interconnected thoughts. He saw the elegant solutions, the shortcuts, the hidden patterns that eluded his peers. He finished most tests significantly earlier than anyone else, often double-checking his answers with a serene confidence that bordered on unnerving. Kevin, who had been a star in his previous school, felt Michael's growing shadow. He would glance over at Michael's desk, a sneer twisting his lips, trying to catch a glimpse of his answers. Once, he even tried to accidentally knock Michael's pencil off the table, hoping to disrupt his focus. Michael simply picked it up, his gaze steady, unwavering, a quiet challenge in his eyes. He didn't engage, didn't complain. He let his work speak for itself. Ms. Jenkins, meticulously grading the papers, found herself confronted with an undeniable truth. Michael was consistently scoring higher than anyone else, often achieving perfect scores on problems that had tripped up even her star student, Kevin. Her initial skepticism began to erode, replaced by a growing sense of unease. It challenged her preconceived notions, forcing her to confront a bias she hadn't realized she harbored. She started observing Michael more closely during class, noticing the keen intelligence in his eyes, the subtle way he would correct a classmate's error without drawing attention to it, the depth of his understanding that went far beyond mere memorization. Yet, a subtle resistance lingered within her. It was easier to believe in the established hierarchy, the comfortable narratives. To acknowledge Michael's undeniable brilliance meant dismantling her own quiet prejudices, a process that was uncomfortable and unsettling. She tried to find fault, a single misstep, but Michael's work was meticulous, his logic unassailable. As the final results for the preliminary rounds were posted, a hush fell over the classroom. Michael's name, accompanied by a perfect score, sat proudly at the top of the list. Below it, Kevin's name, with a respectable but distinctly lower score, seemed to sag in comparison, a collective gasp, then a wave of murmurs. Kevin's face, usually composed, contorted with a mixture of shock and incandescent fury. He shot a venomous glare at Michael, a silent promise of retaliation. Ms. Jenkins, standing by the bulletin board, stared at Michael's name, a complex tapestry of emotions playing across her features. Surprise, a touch of admiration, but also a growing sense of dread for the unpredictable waters she felt the competition was now sailing into. The quiet confidence in Michael's eyes, the very thing that had unnerved her, now seemed to shine with a powerful, almost prophetic light. The stage was set, not just for a competition of intellect, but for a clash of wills, a battle against unspoken biases, and Michael, the resilient star, was ready. The true challenge, however, was yet to come. The air in the school auditorium crackled with an almost palpable energy. It was the day of the final math and science competition, the culmination of weeks of relentless study and quiet battles. Rows of plastic chairs, like silent spectators, faced a raised stage where 3 long tables, each laden with sharpened pencils and crisp test booklets, awaited the finalists. Michael sat at the far end, his posture calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the nervous fidgeting of the other 2 competitors. One was Sarah, a quiet, bespectacled girl known for her meticulousness, and the other, inevitably, was Kevin. Kevin's presence was a palpable weight in the room. His earlier sneers had morphed into a simmering resentment, a barely contained fury that radiated outwards like heat from a furnace. He kept shooting furtive, venomous glances at Michael, his jaw clenched. Michael, however, remained a placid lake, his focus an unbroken surface. He had learned to filter out the noise, to let the negativity wash over him without leaving a mark. His true adversary wasn't Kevin, nor even the challenging problems to come, but the unspoken biases that permeated the very air he breathed. Ms. Jenkins, her face a mask of professional neutrality, stood beside the stern-faced Principal Evans and a distinguished-looking man from the school board. She scanned the audience, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes as her gaze momentarily met Michael's. She had seen his preliminary scores, witnessed his undeniable aptitude, and it had disturbed the tidy narratives she'd unconsciously built. Her internal world, like a perfectly arranged bookshelf, was being subtly reordered, and she found the disarray unsettling. The first round was a rapid-fire session of mental math, numbers hurled like javelins into the silence. Michael answered, with a fluidity that was almost unnatural, his mind a calculator of extraordinary speed and accuracy. He could feel the eyes on him, a mix of awe and bewilderment. Kevin, for his part, struggled, his face reddening with each passing question. Michael effortlessly solved. A bead of sweat trickled down Kevin's temple, a small river carving a path through his carefully gelled hair. Then came the problem-solving round. Each finalist received a unique, complex problem to tackle within a strict time limit. Michael was given a multi-layered physics problem involving projectile motion and air resistance, a challenge designed to separate the truly gifted from the merely well-prepared. He took a deep breath, the familiar thrill of a new puzzle sparking within him. His pencil began to dance across the paper, equations blooming under his steady hand. The rhythmic scratch of his pencil was the only sound in his universe. Suddenly, a cough, sharp and deliberate, echoed through the room. Michael barely registered it, lost in the intricate dance of variables. He heard a soft rustle, a fleeting whisper, like a moth brushing against a window pane. He paused, his eyes still fixed on the problem, but a subtle unease pricked at him. He glanced up, just for a second. Kevin was staring directly at him, a strange, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. Michael shrugged it off, attributing it to Kevin's usual smugness, and dove back into his calculations. He finished well ahead of time, his solution elegantly presented, each step clearly delineated. He double-checked his work, a habit ingrained from years of self-practice, before raising his hand. Ms. Jenkins collected his paper, her eyes lingering for a moment on the dense equations, a faint frown creasing her brow. Just as the time limit expired for the other contestants, a sharp, accusatory voice sliced through the tension. He cheated! All heads snapped towards the source. It was Kevin, his face contorted in a mask of righteous indignation, pointing a trembling finger at Michael. "He had a cheat sheet! I saw him!" A collective gasp swept through the auditorium. Principal Evans, his face pale, rushed forward. "Kevin, what are you saying?" "He had this," Kevin shrieked, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. It was a jumble of formulas and handwritten notes, undeniably a cheat sheet. "I saw him pull it from his bag just before the round started." A cold dread seeped into Michael's bones. He stared at the paper in Kevin's hand, then at Kevin's venomous gaze. His bag, his notes, his entire methodical approach. It was all being twisted into something sinister. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat. Ms. Jenkins snatched the paper from Kevin, her eyes widening as she scanned the contents. "Michael, is this yours?" she asked, her voice laced with a newfound severity, a sharp edge that cut through the previous layers of polite skepticism. Her gaze, once filled with a subtle disdain, was now sharp with suspicion, a predator's focus. Michael shook his head, his voice a strained whisper. "No! That's not mine! I never use cheat sheets!" "Then how do you explain this?" Principal Evans boomed, his voice echoing in the sudden, horrified silence. "And why did Kevin see you with it?" A murmur spread through the audience, a rising tide of judgment. Whispers about unfair advantage and disqualification filled the air. Michael felt his world tilt on its axis. This was the moment. The invisible barrier, the quiet prejudice, had manifested into a tangible, damning accusation. He could feel the weight of every skeptical glance, every whispered doubt crushing him. Just then, the double doors at the back of the auditorium swung open with a soft, authoritative thud. A tall, distinguished man with a neatly trimmed beard and an air of quiet power strode in, flanked by two aides. It was Mayor David Thompson, Michael's father. He wore his official mayoral pin, a small glint of silver against his dark suit, and carried a briefcase. His presence, though unexpected, commanded immediate attention. He was here for a routine pre-event inspection, checking on the arrangements for a citywide youth leadership conference to be held at the school next week. He hadn't expected to walk into a public inquisition involving his own son. Mayor Thompson paused, his eyes sweeping across the tense scene, instantly assessing the gravity of the situation. His gaze landed on Michael, who stood, shoulders slightly slumped, facing the accusations. A flash of protective fury, raw and powerful, surged through the mayor. His initial instinct was to rush forward, to declare Michael's innocence, to use his authority to quell the brewing storm. He saw the crumpled cheat sheet, the accusatory finger of Kevin, the condemning expressions of the faculty. He recognized the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Ms. Jenkins's posture, a sudden conviction in her eyes that chilled him. But then he saw Michael. His son, though visibly shaken, stood his ground, his gaze unwavering, a silent defiance in his eyes. A flicker of memory. Michael, at 7 years old, refusing to let his father intervene in a playground squabble, insisting on resolving it himself. "I have to do it, Dad," he'd said, his small voice resolute. "Otherwise, I'll never learn how to stand up for myself." A profound realization washed over the mayor. This wasn't just about clearing Michael's name. It was about Michael's own journey, his own battle. To intervene now, to pull rank, would be to rob his son of the very lesson he was so determined to learn. It would confirm the unspoken whispers of privilege that always clung to their family name. He would trust Michael. He had to. So, with a Herculean effort of will, Mayor Thompson remained where he was, fading subtly into the background near the back exit, an unseen guardian in the wings. His expression became neutral, his posture relaxed, as if he were merely an observer. But his eyes, sharp and intense, were fixed on his son, watching, waiting, praying. The very air around him, thick with the weight of his unrevealed identity, vibrated with unspoken tension. Principal Evans, oblivious to the mayor's true relationship to Michael, continued to press. "Michael, we need an explanation. This is a serious accusation. Cheating carries severe penalties." Michael, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, finally found his voice. It was shaky at first, but with each word it gained strength, clarity. "I didn't cheat," he stated, his eyes locking onto Ms. Jenkins, then sweeping to the principal. "That's not my handwriting, and those aren't my notes. I don't need them." His voice, though young, carried an unexpected resonance, a quiet conviction that momentarily silenced the murmurs. He knew he had to fight, not with shouts or accusations, but with the very tool that had always been his sanctuary: logic. The stage was now set, not just for a contest of intellect, but for a trial of truth, with Michael, the resilient star, standing alone against the rising tide of doubt and prejudice. The ultimate challenge had just begun. The silence that followed, Michael's unwavering declaration, hung heavy, a fragile truce before the storm. Every eye in the auditorium was fixed on him, a crucible of doubt and dawning curiosity. Kevin, his face contorted in a mask of frustrated rage, still clutched the crumpled cheat sheet, a damning prop in his desperate play. Ms. Jenkins, caught between her ingrained biases and the unsettling evidence of Michael's calm conviction, shifted uneasily. Principal Evans, a man of rules and order, found himself on unfamiliar ground, the clear lines of justice blurring before his eyes. "Not my handwriting," Michael repeated, his voice gaining strength. "And those aren't my notes. I solve problems using logic, not by memorizing answers." He looked directly at Ms. Jenkins, a silent challenge in his gaze. "Look at my preliminary test papers. My work is consistently methodical, building from first principles. If I needed a cheat sheet, it would look like a simplified diagram of my thought process, not a haphazard jumble of formulas." He paused, then continued, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "And consider this. If I had a cheat sheet, why would I leave it so easily accessible for anyone to find right before the final round? It makes no logical sense for someone trying to cheat." He extended his hand, palm open. "Principal Evans, if you examine the paper, you'll see it's crumpled and creased in a way that suggests it was hastily jammed into a pocket, not carefully placed in a bag as part of a pre-planned deception." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Ms. Jenkins, compelled by an inexplicable pull, took the crumpled sheet from Kevin. Her eyes, usually so quick to judge, now studied the paper with a renewed scrutiny. She compared it to Michael's earlier test papers, remembering the elegant, almost artistic way he laid out his solutions. The cheat sheet indeed was crude, disorganized, its handwriting notably different from Michael's precise script. The mayor, Still an unrevealed presence at the back, watched with a quiet intensity that belied his calm demeanor. His heart swelled with a mixture of pride and profound relief. This was his son, standing firm, not with a borrowed title, but with the undeniable power of his own intellect. Michael wasn't just defending himself, he was dismantling the very edifice of prejudice, brick by logical brick. As Ms. Jenkins's gaze swept back to Kevin, a flicker of understanding, cold and sharp, ignited in her eyes. The boy's face, pale and sweaty, now bore not just anger, but a creeping fear. "Kevin," Ms. Jenkins said, her voice low and dangerous, "what is this?" Her tone was no longer accusatory towards Michael, but piercingly direct at Kevin. Kevin stammered, I just found it. It was near his desk." His voice wavered, a stark contrast to his earlier bluster. "You said you saw him pull it from his bag," Michael interjected, his voice calm, cutting through Kevin's faltering lie like a surgeon's scalpel. "Which is it, Kevin? Did I pull it out, or did you find it?" The contradiction hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Principal Evans, a furrow deepening between his brows, stepped forward. "Kevin, we need the truth." Cornered, his bravado crumbling, Kevin's face crumpled. Tears welled in his eyes, not of remorse, but of self-pity and exposure. I just wanted to win," he choked out, his voice a pathetic whimper. "He was always so good. I wanted to stop him." The confession, raw and unvarnished, stripped away the last vestiges of doubt. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Ms. Jenkins felt a profound wave of shame wash over her. Her face flushed scarlet. The biases she hadn't realized she harbored, the subtle judgments she had made, now lay exposed and ugly before her. She had been so ready to believe the worst, to see what she expected to see. Her professional facade cracked, revealing a raw vulnerability. "Michael," she began, her voice thick with emotion, I am so truly sorry." Her apology, heartfelt and genuine, resonated through the stunned silence. It was not just an apology for the accusation, but for all the unspoken slights, the overlooked moments, the subtle forms of exclusion she had allowed. Principal Evans, visibly shaken, addressed the audience. "This is a serious matter. Kevin's actions will be dealt with appropriately." He looked at Michael, his expression now one of profound respect. "Michael, your integrity and composure under pressure are truly exemplary. You are reinstated immediately. Please resume the competition." The competition resumed, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. The tension, once rooted in an unjust accusation, was now a quiet reverence for Michael's strength. He finished the final round with the same quiet precision, the numbers and symbols dancing in perfect harmony. When the results were announced, it was no longer a surprise. Michael was the undisputed winner of the Northwood Elementary Math and Science competition. The cheers, initially hesitant, erupted into a thunderous applause that shook the very foundations of the auditorium. It was a roar of genuine admiration, a collective recognition of raw talent and unwavering spirit. He walked to the stage, his head held high, the metallic gleam of the trophy reflecting the bright future ahead. As Michael held the gleaming trophy, a quiet pride radiated from him. He glanced at Ms. Jenkins. Her eyes, filled with a newfound respect and a hint of sadness, met his. She approached him, her voice barely a whisper. "Michael," she said, "you taught us all a lesson today, a profound one." She didn't mean just the math problems. She meant the lesson of seeing beyond the surface, of challenging one's own prejudices, of recognizing brilliance wherever it may reside. In the days and weeks that followed, Northwood Elementary began to change. Ms. Jenkins, profoundly impacted by the incident, dedicated herself to fostering a truly inclusive classroom. She implemented new diversity programs, encouraged open discussions about empathy and respect, and made a conscious effort to ensure every child felt seen, heard, and valued. The subtle slights Michael had faced began to dissipate, replaced by genuine curiosity and acceptance. Students, initially hesitant, now sought Michael out, not just for help with math problems, but to simply talk, to befriend him. Kevin, humbled and remorseful, sought Michael out one afternoon. "Michael," he mumbled, his eyes cast down. I was wrong. About everything. I'm sorry." Michael, with the quiet grace that defined him, simply nodded. "It's okay, Kevin. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." It was a gesture of forgiveness that spoke volumes, a powerful testament to Michael's inner strength. Mayor Thompson, watching from a distance as Michael blossomed in his new environment, felt a joy deeper than any political victory. He had seen his son not just win a trophy, but win hearts and minds. Michael had not leaned on his father's power, but had instead used his own brilliance, his own quiet resilience, to dismantle prejudice and build bridges of understanding. The city's future, he realized, was not just in his hands, but in the hands of young, resilient stars like Michael, who, through their own unyielding light, could illuminate the path towards a more just and equitable world. Michael, the silent star, had shown them all that true power lay not in titles or status, but in the unshakable truth of one's own character. A concluding reflection. Thank you for joining us on Michael's inspiring journey in The Resilient Star. This story reminds us that true strength lies not in inherited privilege, but in the power of one's own intellect and integrity. Michael's unwavering spirit teaches us that prejudice can be challenged and overcome when we bravely stand for truth. It's a powerful lesson in empathy, acceptance, and the courage to shine, even when the world tries to dim your light. We hope this tale encourages you to look beyond surface differences and celebrate the unique brilliance within every individual. What were your favorite moments? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more uplifting stories. Thank you for listening.